Folks, see, are we recording yet? Okay, looks like we're recording. Good evening. This is a council workshop special meeting, Tuesday, January 26th, 2021. It's 5:30 p.m. and this a virtual contact by Zoom. I call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is Patrick Rondinelli, Regional Manager with the Department of Local Affairs, DOLA, will present Council 101 workshop. Good evening, Patrick.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen here. Hold on one second. And we'll bring up the presentation. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that now.
Yep, I can see
Yes.
it.
Great. Great. And what I'll do is I'll just tell everybody, you know, when I go through this presentation, I like to try and keep it, you know, pretty open, engaging. I do a lot of talking, so I will preface that and warn you ahead of time. And I'll kind of be going through some of these pieces. Some of it might be relevant, you know, might be really relevant, and I'll want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into it. Other parts of it, it might be stuff that you're already familiar with. I've talked to John and corresponded with Linda about some of the things you guys have already done. So, you know, I may skim through it, keeping an eye on our timing, those type of things. All that said, though, if you got a question or you want to discuss any of the subjects that I'm going to touch on tonight a little bit more, please do not hesitate to just speak up, catch my attention, and I'll be more than happy to, you know, stop and talk into those, to the information a little bit more. So as the mayor said, my name is Patrick Rondinelli. I'm the Southwest Regional Manager with the Department of Local Affairs. And this is what I'm going to go through tonight as part of our presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about who DOLA is. You know, people like Orly knows very familiar with who DOLA is in our interactions over the years. But, you know, some of you, especially the very new members on the City Council, may not be familiar with that. So I want to talk about that a little bit. We'll talk about roles and responsibilities, and this includes all of you as individual council members and you as a body as a whole as the City Council. But we also go into, and this leads a little bit into the organizational structure, you know, the council's relationship with your city manager, the council's relationship with your staff, with boards and commissions that you have out there, and with your citizens and applicants and what role they play in the way our local government process works. We'll talk about a little bit about types of meetings for elected officials, and I'll touch base on how to keep out of trouble, but I know the city attorney Mike's on the call here too, and you know, I'll always default more to Mike and his role as your attorney and the professional expert advice that he can provide to you on that. But then we'll conclude with working together as a city council. So, you know, like I said, I like to keep this free flow. So, you know, if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them. But I will also have some time at the end as we kind of summarize everything up. If you guys have got questions you want to save till then, whatever it may be, please don't hesitate to just be casual and discuss the way you would like to go through. So with that, real quick, Colorado Department of Local Affairs. So we are a department of the state of Colorado, just like CDOT or Department of Education, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Public Health and Environment. We are the smallest department in the state of Colorado, though. DOLA only has a total of about 170 employees, you know, compared to, you know, CDOT, which is just huge and massive, obviously. You know, this is the mission of DOLA, strengthen Colorado communities. And we have a number of different groups that work in with that. So we have a number of divisions, the equitable and consistent implementation of property tax. So the division of property tax and the division of oh, guys, now I'm drawing a blank on them. Anyways, so if any of you wanted to dispute, for example, your property tax, there's a process that you can go through in regards to that. And ultimately, what goes up to one of the divisions within DOLA, who would review that as a non-binding, or excuse me, a non-committed arbitrary group that would review those type of appeals that would be out there. Community development is one of the things that we provide, a lot of services to that. I know a couple of you participated last February. We had Andy Hill from our department that came and did a presentation to the Planning Commission and about Planning Commission's role, very similar to this. That's part of the community development team. Technical and financial support for communities that we do, and I'll touch base on that a little bit in regards to the role with City Council. The Division of Housing is a part of DOLA also, and they work with housing projects all throughout the state of Colorado. And it can be with local governments, it can be with housing authorities, it could be with a whole wide range of groups that they do with that. I actually have a counterpart who lives out in the field and covers the southwest part of the state, Andrew Ashley, who works with that. We partner together a lot with that. And then emergency preparedness, mitigation, response, and recovery. We are not a part of the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, who works with like the emergency managers. So would be working with Jim Spratlin with the county emergency management, but we partner once again with them. Some of you may know Tom McNamara. He's the DHSEM field staff that works with emergency management, but we do a lot of partnership with that. An example, once again, is a couple years ago during the 416 fire over there in La Plata County. I was in the EOC every single day for 3 weeks along with everybody else. And we really tried to help we do some assistance and working with our partners at DHSEM on everything from that preparation and mitigation side, but especially the response and recovery, helping all of you as elected officials in the event that there was some type of emergency situation of what you're planning for the long-term recovery of your communities. So as I said, there's 5 divisions within DOLA. I work within the Division of Local Government. This really sums up what we do, providing technical and financial assistance to local governments. The financial assistance, we have a number of grant programs that we do. Our big major bread and butter is the Energy and Mineral Impact Assistance Fund. That's where most of the funding comes to local governments that we provide. We, for example, provided a lot of funding in regards to City Hall for our City Council, or for the City of Cortez. So that's where we go through that. Once again, I'll talk a little bit more about the grants later on, because I think John has briefed you all. We have some issues right now that the city can't apply for any of our grant funding because of the audit situation. But trust me, I know you guys are working diligently to do that. It does not reflect negatively on you. We just statutorily can't contract with you in regards to grant money until the audit situation is resolved. But I want you to still know those opportunities are out there. I talk a lot with Chris Burkett and with John when opportunities do come along, so we're staying connected and available there. So that's on the financial side. But on the technical side, let me give a little bit more background on that. Technical, this is a lot of the technical assistance that we provide. We really try to provide some guidance and assistance to local governments and when it comes into good governmental practices. So everything from, once again, land use development, community planning, those type of things, to financial advisory, providing some financial assistance and guidance to communities, to doing a lot of this, where I come in and would work with the city council or work with your staff on different practices, everything from adopting financial policies to this type of training, or even I can expand further into that about working with all of you. Like if you wanted to develop a community vision, strategic plan, capital improvement planning, those type of things, I'm here to do it. Now, here's the best part. I'm free. I come at no charge to the city council. So even like to have me come in and do this training tonight, it's a matter of John and Linda reached out to me and said, hey, could you do something to help with our city council? We provide that service to you free of charge. It's all about working with local government. So I do work with the county. work with municipalities. I work with special districts in the region. The Cortez Sanitation District, for example, I was just corresponding with Jan Nelson today, wrapping up some grant money that we'd given for their big project that they did in the Carpenter Hill area. Those type of things is what I do. Give you all a little bit of background about me, though, too, in relationship to that. So, as I mentioned, I live in the area. We have 8 regional managers throughout the state. We all have our own individual regions, and we live within those regions that we work with. So I live in Ouray, so I'm a couple of hours away from you guys. I cover Montrose County, Ouray, San Juan, San Miguel, Dolores, Montezuma, La Plata, and Archuleta counties. I've been with DOLA for just over 3 years, actually 3.5 years almost now. Prior to that, I was the city administrator in Ouray for 13 years. So my whole background is local government. I believe strongly in local government. I also believe strongly in local control. When I was the city administrator in Ouray, I served for 4 years on the executive committee with CML, who's also a big proponent of local control. So, I've got that background in management. I'm also an ICMA member, the International City and County Management Association. I've been a member of theirs for 10 years, follow their code of ethics and those type of things. So that's a little bit of my background of where I come from. So I've been doing this work for a number of years. I understand working with elected officials like all of you, and then working from a staff standpoint. I do have to be honest, I default to staff a little bit because that's where I came from. But I work with local elected officials all the time too. So any of you, I correspond with John and Linda quite a bit, but any of you, if you ever need anything, and I'll have my contact information here at the end, please feel free to reach out to me. And if you got questions, if you got, hey, we could really use some assistance in this area, please always feel free to reach out on those things. So, as I said, I want to jump into roles and responsibilities, talking about elected officials, the advisory boards, and what role they play to all of you as the elected officials, Planning Commission and its important role, the relationship you all have with the city manager, and I know with the transition that John announced with his retirement, what could be coming up in the future, I'll talk a little bit about that, but also your staff, your professional staff, and what role they can play to support you to be successful in what you do. Citizens play an important role, obviously, and then another group that kind of gets lost sometimes are applicants. The applicants you have going through your land use process, they play an important role in assisting you in how you're guiding your community forward. So real quick, this is kind of rudimentary, but I like to still touch up place on it. Elected officials. This is what your role is. Now, I always start this with, a lot of times when I'm working with elected officials, especially newly elected officials, okay, you've had election night, vote count come in, you've done all this work, as part of your campaign, you've been elected to city council. Now what? What does that mean? And helping all of you understand, there's a difference between you as an elected official individually, and then you as the city council as a body of what you work with. A lot of people that don't have experience in local government, but they end up running for city council, they get elected, they think, okay, now I've got all this type of authority. And I always try to tell them, no, you don't. You think you do, and a lot of the people who voted for you think you've got some type of authority, but really you're now one of a body of 7 that you have to work together, and everything is done as the success of the city council, not as you as individual council members. And so it's really important to start thinking in that idea of how do we work together? And I use the term as a team, but it does not mean necessarily you're working together as a team of everybody is on the same page all the time. You all bring individual perspectives, points of view, background, your own personal values that you bring it, political diversity, all those type of things come together that you need to now work together, though, as a body to work for the common goal, which everybody that I've ever met that gets elected has the common goal. They want to do what's best for their community. Now you have different opinions and views of what's best for your community, but that's part of working together as the city council And like I said, we'll go into this more detail here a little bit, but really start that idea of, okay, you've been elected, you are responsible to your citizens, and especially those people who specifically voted for you because they saw some type of vision in you that they want represented on their city council. But really the success of your council comes down to all of you working together. So once again, what's the role of the elected officials? You set the policy. You're setting the vision, the direction that your community is going. Your staff will then carry out that policy on your behalf. Use the enabling authority of the charter to protect the public's interests. One of the most important responsibilities that you all have is you're now responsible for taxpayer dollars and assets. And when you think about it, that's a pretty lofty responsibility that your citizens have put on your shoulders. They're entrusting you their tax dollars and the public assets that are out there in your community. They're relying on you to make the best decisions for your community with those resources that are out there. Your job is to appoint staff and boards. Staff, and you're going to hear me hit on this a couple of times. You really appoint 3 positions, and that's it. You have the city manager, obviously, who reports to you. He's your one employee that reports to you, that carries out the mission, the vision of the city council. But you also appoint the city attorney and the municipal judge. Beyond that, those are your employees that report to you. You hire the rest of, you hire them to carry out those responsibilities, and they hire out the rest of your staff within the organization. And then this last line of providing general direction and ongoing two-way communication, the success of any community, and I can give you examples not only just throughout my region, but throughout the state. And we see it when we all tour around and go on vacation in the state or go visit family in other places, whatever it may be. Some of those communities that are really, they seem to be hitting on all cylinders. And then there's those other communities that just are struggling and they're challenged with a lot of different things, whether it's political discourse that's occurring within the community or economic challenges that are occurring. I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's this pandemic thing that's happening that's really impacted a lot of communities. There's a lot of those challenges that are out there, but it really comes down to the success is the communication that goes on. And once again, going back to that team reference, how the organization is working together, not just the city council and elected officials, how you're interacting and working together, but how you are interacting with your staff, how you're interacting with the community as a whole, and what's the communication that's going on with that. Now, a little bit of background with me, and as you guys know, in a lot of our rural communities, we all wear multiple hats. We have different roles. Well, I've been on the Ouray Volunteer Fire Department for 14 years now. I've been the battalion chief for 10 of those years. And then I'm also on the county extrication team and support all the car accidents throughout the county. Every emergency incident I've ever been on, when we do a debrief at the end, the number one challenge we always face is communication. We no matter how hard we work on communication, we always point out any challenges that we had during an incident. Communication was one of those challenges. Where can we be better with that? It's the same thing. You guys are going to, as you move forward, and you've probably already seen it with some of your interactions now, when you're looking at, okay, what could we have done better? Communication is always one of those things. You've always got to be working on how you communicate with each other, with your staff, with your citizens. So I like to run down this list. I won't read through each and every single one of these, but I think this is important to keep in mind as a member of the city council, what your role is. And there's some do's and don'ts that you want to pay attention to this. And if you haven't run into this already, this is a little mantra that I always keep in mind, especially as you start to get into some of those challenging things. What if our action or my personal action as a city council member was on the front page of the newspaper? Is that where I want to see it? Hopefully you're seeing things like, city council successfully maneuvers this situation, or city council is conducting these public outreach meetings to get input on these important decisions. Those are the kind of headlines you don't mind seeing in the newspaper. You don't want to see some of this stuff that's on the right-hand side that is standing out there. So, once again, you as a city council, you're going to have people, especially the newly elected people. Anybody that has been on council for a while already knows this, but some of the newly elected people are going to keep in mind, you've got people who voted for you that now think they have a special in with you. And so you've got to be paying attention to that first special thing. You're not there in any role of a particular special interest. You represent all the citizens of the city of Cortez now. And you've got to keep that bigger, broader picture in mind with some of the decisions that you're going to need to make here in the future. Obviously, don't use your role on council for your personal advantage. Privileged information is important. This next one, really keep in mind council issues. You want to come in with an open mind. You all have your important background that you bring to the city council that is important to the decisions that are going to be made, whether it's your personal experiences, whether it's conversations you've had with other individuals, whether it's research that you've done, not only information or research that's provided to you by your staff, but you may be, doing research on the internet yourselves on a particular topic, whatever it may be, that's fine. You bring those in. But when you all come together as a body, because that last point is you can't exercise any type of authority without the body's decision. You want to be able to provide that information to all of you, but bring your open mind to it. Listen to some of the feedback your other fellow council members have. Listen to the information that maybe citizens will be providing to you. But then you move into that stage where you're deliberating, you're discussing what action the council should be taking. Listen to each other, because ultimately it's the decision of the body of 7 that's made, and you have that vote that takes place. And it's really important to try and have an open mind to have that, because there will be things that are brought forward that you were not anticipating, or you hadn't thought of, or you didn't research before. And the example I always give to this, and if we were in a room together, when I normally do this training, we're all together in person, I always point to my computer in the middle of the room. And this is the analogy I use as I go, look at my computer. And if I asked you all individually to describe my computer, you would all have a slightly different point of view. If you were sitting behind my computer, you would be describing what you see from that point of view. If you were on the front side of my computer, though, it's a very different view, and you would describe something differently. But if we all took turns describing what we see of my computer, in the end, we all have a better vision. It's not just what you see, but you're understanding what one of your fellow council members is seeing from their point of view. So that's that idea that let's listen to the different points of view. And from there, hopefully you individually can then create a better, well-rounded picture in your mind. So then as you are finally taking action to make a decision on a topic, you've got a well-informed decision. Once again, doesn't mean you're going to always agree on everything. It's not. The goal isn't necessarily to have 7 of you agreeing on every topic all the time. It's good to have different points of view and discussion, and sometimes a little heated discussion. But in the end, you're trying to gain as much information so that you can make a well-informed decision. But at that last point, and I'm going to reiterate this a couple times here later on again, is you don't have the authority to exercise any type of action as individual members of the city council. Only the city council as a body can authorize any type of action or authority, unless it's delegated to you. But once again, it's you as a body coming together. So, just hypothetically, you're involved in some type of negotiations and you want 2 or 3 of your council members to be involved in the front-hand discussion of those negotiations. You as the body, as the city council, would grant authority to those 3 council members or those 2 council members. You would establish parameters of what they could negotiate within, but they're not authorized to work necessarily on the whole of the body of the city council. It still needs to come back to you all for review. Some key elements to consider, that what people are looking forward to. Leadership is the obvious one. All of you got elected because people saw some level of leadership in your actions, in your views, in your values, and they expect you to do that. Now, does not mean city council, or you won't have citizens come to a city council meeting and they give you the classic line, "You work for us," which is true. You work on behalf of your citizens, but it does not necessarily mean that you're there just to be this rubber stamp of whatever the public is determining, or who was the loudest voice at a council meeting. They have chosen you based on your leadership. And you're in that position, whether you like it or not, and what that means is sometimes there's going to be decisions that you need to make that are not a comfortable decision to make, that you don't necessarily want to do. It's because you know somebody's going to be on the downside of it or is going to strongly disagree with it. But your citizens have chosen you and they expect you to be that leader. Change is disruptive, even when it's the right thing to do. Change occurs though all the time. I tell people all the time, that's the consistent in life. Once again, an analogy I use with this is change is going to occur no matter what you do. I look at it the same way as me personally. I get older every single day, no matter whether I like it or not. I can't stop getting older. But what I can do is be an active participant in how I get older and control that way. So change can occur, but it doesn't mean you have to lose your values. It doesn't mean you have to lose your community's culture, but it depends on how active you are in that. I can sit back as I get older and be frustrated with it, or I can adjust my life. I can't do things that I used to do in my 20s. I eat differently though. I treat my body differently. I exercise differently because there are those activities that I want to be able to do in my life going forward. So change is going to occur no matter what, but how you interact and how you actively manage it will control how those things occur. The big picture, that first line, it's important. You're making decisions that impact people's lives. And there may be decisions, I tell this to councils all the time. Often you're in a city council meeting and you're making a decision. You've got a topic that's on your agenda that night. You're looking at how's that going to impact us today? And that's rightfully so that you should be doing that. But an important thing that you need to remember as a city council, you make decisions that are not only impacting people today, but your decisions will often have impacts a year from now, 5 years from now, or even potentially 20 years from now. I mean, as you go through, you all will be facing some decisions and discussing topics that maybe a city council 10 years ago discussed. I would be shocked, especially with Orly's experience. I keep picking on Orly just because I know of his experience as a long-term city council member. How often Orly will say, I remember when this topic came up back in 2012 or something like that, and we at that time had this issue and we had to, work through that process. Then you will be making decisions that impact your community for a lot of years. And so always keep that in mind. I always tell people though, you got to keep the sense that you're operating at kind of that 35,000 foot level. You're really up there with what's the long-term impact to these things? What are these decisions? Not only do they have on today, but where do they really take our community into the future? Also on that big picture thing, agree to disagree. There's going to be times, as I said, you're not going to have 7-0 votes all the time. Sometimes is great, but you could have 6-1. You could have 5-2. You could have a lot of 3-4. But we'll get into this a little bit more. Once you guys have made that decision, once you've gone through the democratic process of hearing the information, getting it presented to you, taking input from your staff, taking input from your citizens, providing the dialogue, the deliberation you all do as a council, and then you make a decision. When those decisions are made, sometimes it's just, hey, I understand your point of view. I hope you understand my point of view, but we're not going to agree on this final decision. You need to respect that. That last piece too, I want to highlight, position is a 24/7 obligation. Don't think you're only a city council member when you're at a city council meeting or when you're in city hall or some kind of community meeting. People will, if you haven't got this already, if you're at city market, people will stop you in the aisle to talk about something. You could be at the post office. Somebody's going to stop and talk to you. You could be at dinner, having dinner with friends or with family, and somebody will come up to you. You could be walking just down the street with your dog. Somebody will come up to you. That's just the territory that comes with being an elected official. I'll tell you in Uray, I got pretty adept at knowing what alleys I could navigate when I was trying to, just have some peace of mind. Instead of walking down the street to go home, I would navigate through some alleys just to try and get a little bit of quietness. But, as an elected official, your position is there all the time. The important, as I've talked before about gathering information and how you do that, but that last line, and I underline this there because this gets back into that leadership piece too. The right decision is not necessarily the most popular, and sometimes the most popular decision is not the right decision. And that can be very difficult for a city council, especially when you've got a room full of citizens at a council meeting that are yelling at you, they're upset, they're frustrated. But once again, a lot of that is you're trying to make that decision of what's best for your community, not only today, but in the long term. Where is our community going? What direction are we going? Yeah, it may be a lousy decision. I don't mean you've made a poor decision. I mean a lousy choice that you're having to present to your citizens today. But if it's for the betterment of your community for the long run, sometimes you have to make those decisions. And it can be very difficult to help citizens understand that. Key elements to consider. Once again, I always put that newspaper headline on there, and it's talking about a town administrator in this particular case, but just always thinking about what will this look like if it's on the front page of the newspaper. A quick example I will give on this, with the pandemic and the coronavirus relief fund, the CARES Act that Congress passed this last year, and all the money that got allocated to the counties and the municipalities, but there was a lot of parameters on what those dollars could be spent on. There was a community, the idea of the CARES Act was the dollars were supposed to be helping communities in their response and addressing the needs of their community related to COVID-19. And so a lot of people were trying to submit, okay, we had expenses here, expenses there. Some of the logical ones, and like I know the city council did, was using some of the CVRF dollars to help with economic development in your community by doing business relief programs for your local businesses. Great. Those were, obviously a lot of people used those expenses to address like purchasing PPE for their staff, or making adjustments and changes in their city hall so the citizens could come in, putting up plexiglass or having, sanitizer dispensers, all those type of things were logical. There was a community in Colorado that wanted to use their CVF dollar to purchase golf carts. And there was a lot of question of how is the purchase of golf carts justified in response of this municipality's response to COVID-19 and addressing this pandemic in your community. And they tried to argue what they were doing. And my counterpart that was working with this community finally said, okay, let me understand this. You're comfortable on the headline of your newspaper saying, city of so-and-so spent coronavirus relief dollars to purchase golf carts. And soon as my colleagues said that to this municipality, they went, yeah, you're right. We probably don't want to see that on the headline of our local newspaper. And they backed off on it. So, you want to keep I always say that's a good thing to just keep in mind as your litmus test, kind of what would this look like in the newspaper. So with that, ethics, code of conduct. Code of conduct is really important thing. I encourage you as elected officials, always be professional. And I'm not saying any of you are saying, oh, I'm not going to be professional. Of course you all want to be professional. The old golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. But that really stands out when you're an elected official in a city council meeting, especially when you've got a controversial topic, you start having some heated discussions on there. You always want to still be professional. You want your citizens to have confidence and see all of you interacting together in a professional manner. I think we can all know of examples that we've seen elected officials throughout the years that they do something that just really wasn't very professional, and it makes you lose kind of confidence in their leadership and their decision-making process. So you really want to keep that in mind. Perception is reality as an elected official, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later on about conflict of interest, but keep in mind, perception is reality. Even if there isn't a conflict there, or there isn't an issue that, is a violation of anything, whether it's code of conduct or your actions as an elected official, you want to be conscious of the perception of it. I'll talk a little bit more about this, about like the open meetings law and the gathering of you together. So the example I'll give is, you're at a community event of some type and there's other city council members that are there, and you guys all happen to be at the punch bowl or the bar together, getting the drinks at the same time, and you're just visiting with each other. It's totally innocent. You're just asking, how's your day going? What a nice event, whatever it may be. But other people in that community may be looking at you, and they're thinking they're discussing something related to the city, or they're making a decision. So you got to just be conscious of those things. That's their perception of how they're seeing it. Confidentiality, once again, we talk about. This other one, be a positive ambassador for the community. Lots of things go on, but people rely on you to see the good in what's happening. Despite controversial issues that may be out there, they really rely on you to say, but guess what, folks? Maybe we got some tough times, but we're going to get through this. We're going to be great. The city of Cortez had a lot of great things going for all of you. There's a lot of positive things that are there, and you got to make sure you bring those up to the forefront. I know what gets covered in the news often, or what people focus on, are the negative things, but it's really up to you all to be the positive people to sit there and say, yeah, we've got our challenges, but every community has our challenges, but we also have some great positive things in our community here that you should be proud of, and you want to highlight those things. Consistency is something that you'll hear me talk on a few different times here. People rely on consistency within your organization. They rely on the consistency of you and your actions. An example of this is, citizens rely on the consistency of when you have your city council meetings. You have your city council meetings at the same time, on the same days of each month, and generally in the same location at City Hall. Obviously, our lives have been changed a little bit with Zoom meeting, but your citizens rely on that, because that's when they know they can go to a council meeting to hear the subjects that you're going to be discussing, or there is that topic that they want, that's important to them, and they want to be able to express their issues to you, or they want to bring something new to your attention. They rely on that consistency. Your applicants, land use applicants, they rely on consistency, and it comes down to fairness. How often do you hear that idea that you want to treat all your citizens equally? So if one applicant comes in with some type of land use proposal, and then another applicant comes in with a similar proposal, they're obviously going to be expecting some type of similar treatment through that process. You really want to be aware of that. And when you vary from that consistency, that's where some liability issues come before you in the city and the organization. Involvement, public service means involvement. As we said before, you're going to get phone calls, you're going to get emails, you're going to have people come knock on your door, you're going to have people stop you on the street at the gas station. You're going to be involved. You're going to be asked to join different committees, whether they're committees or boards that the city council is appointed, or it could be, other organizations in the community. People like to have city council members or leaders of your community as part of the library board, for example, or some other type of organization. You're going to get asked to be at all those. I always really like to highlight that second bullet point, though. Be careful of overextending yourself. When I used to get newly elected city council members in Ouray, I would do an 8-hour council orientation, because we would do deep dives into current topics, current situations. We would tour public, the city facilities, all those type of things. But I used to tell a lot of them, it's not just a job that you attend a council meeting for an hour a couple times a month and that's it. There's a lot that goes involved into being on a city council, and you got to really pace yourself with that, because it can become overwhelming and you don't want to overextend yourself. And then lastly, there's a lot of resources out there to support you. Obviously, you have each other. You need to look at each other as support when it comes to city council members. Some of you have a number of years of experience. Some of you are brand new to the job. It does not mean you, as brand new, can't pick up the phone or have a cup of coffee with one of your fellow council members and say, hey, can you give me some advice on how to handle citizens when they come to me about this? What have your experiences been? Those type of things. Rely on those. Your staff is a great resource. I know you've got John and his years of experience right now for the next couple months, but you've got a lot of other great experienced staff that works for you on your city, there at the city, but also, when you hire that new manager, what you're going to be looking for in that, you've got their professional expertise and training to rely on. But you also have a lot of great organizations and other neighbors out there that you could call on. Your neighboring communities, other communities of like size to all of you. Reaching out and talking to some of your elected officials from those communities is a great plan and idea to do. And then some of the organizations. CML, as I mentioned before, I served on the executive board for 4 years with CML, but I want to highlight, as a city administrator for a small rural community, CML was a great resource, not only for me, but my elected officials on all things about local government, municipal government. I do also really encourage all of you to get involved in CML. Their annual conference every June is a great opportunity to interact with other elected officials from all around the state. They have incredible sessions, but they also do district meetings, regional meetings in the springtime and in the fall. I encourage you to always try and attend those. Go to their website. They have a lot of resources that you can just access off of their website, including for newly elected officials, for example. CML is a great resource to call on. CIRSA, your insurance carrier, is another great resource. I believe you've done some liability training through CIRSA. I used to bring in CIRSA annually to do public official liability training. And yes, it can be the same stuff over and over again, but especially as you do this for a couple of years, you're going to start to find, oh yeah, I remember hearing about that in a presentation a while ago, but you get wrapped up in other things, you kind of forget some of these pieces. It's good to have that resource. DOLA is a great resource. Once again, you can call on me anytime. And then NLC, the National League of Cities. I'm not sure, John, you'd have to tell me if the city of Cortez is a member of NLC, but NLC is another great resource. It's like CML, just obviously nationally, and represents cities from all across, municipal government from all across the state, the United States. Before I move on to advisory boards and commissions, any questions or comments about city council? Okay. Advisory boards. Very first line is important. They are there to advise the city council. They cannot act independent of the city council. They cannot make any decisions on behalf of the city council. They cannot enter into any type of agreements. They cannot make any type of promises. They are there to advise you. You guys have, as elected officials, you suddenly, the day you were sworn in, have to be experts on a wide range of topics and issues, whether it's financial issues, whether it's utilities and public safety issues, managing political issues, whatever it may be. You're all of a sudden, your citizens expect you to be an expert on a lot of those type of things. Your knowledge will increase over time the more years you serve on city council, but even seasoned city council members will tell you there are topics that come up that they've never had experience with or dealt with. The example I always use with this, think back some years back before marijuana was legal. None of us ever thought we'd have to deal with marijuana issues. And then all of a sudden the citizens of Colorado legalized first with medical marijuana, and then we went to where we are today. Wow, it's a whole different world where we are today. I think about the educational process we had to go through to learn about, well, how do we manage this industry now? How do we ensure safety in our community, especially our citizens who are opposed to marijuana? How do we address their concerns, but also support what this is going to look like and do in our communities? That was an example to do. Well, one of those things you guys can do is appoint advisory boards to help you with those things. You get a group of citizens together and you can give them tasks or specific needs that you have that you want them to go in and really do the deep dive for you on your behalf, do the research, and then provide a report or updates back to you on those subjects, so that when decisions do need to be made, you've got better background in it, that they've gone through, they've vetted those things out. So really, advisory boards are very useful. Now, I know it can be sometimes difficult to find enough volunteers to serve on them because they're not glamorous. But you want to encourage those and utilize those advisory boards for those important topics that are out there. Most communities have advisory boards, like, once again, for parks and recreation, for example, economic development. Those are common ones. Historic preservation, sometimes you'll see that out there. Those are great things that can be a great asset to you. As I said, though, they can't make decisions on behalf of the city council. They're there to only provide advice. It does not mean, though, the city council has to take their advice. You want to be respectful of those advisory boards that you create, because, like I said, you're asking them, you want to be clear on what you want them to do. You want to be clear on what their mission is. What is the information, the topic you want them to do research on and provide you advice back. And you want to be respectful for that. But once again, you guys are the ones that are ultimately the decision makers. You all are the ones that the citizens are going to hold accountable for. And so maybe the advisory committee comes to you with some advice on something, but you're making a decision that you're looking at the long term. What does this look like for our community 5 years, 10 years from now? Does not mean they can't present something to you and you could say, hey, we want you to go back and do some more research on what's this going to look like 10 years from now for our community. But sometimes you need to make a decision right then, and you may go against the advice that they provide. An example I'll use in city of Ouray, to this day, we still do not have a business license, for example, but it was a hotly discussed topic a couple of times in my 13 years with the city of Ouray. We had an economic development committee that really did some deep dives into that, what it would look like, what was the purpose, what was the data we were trying to gather out of it. It's not just a money-making tool like some citizens or some businesses or citizens will tell you for your city. But you want to say, okay, if we had a business license, what does it look like? What's the data that we're trying to collect? What's a fair fee to charge for business license? Are there exceptions to it? All those type of things. We had advisory committees that did a lot of deep research on behalf of the city council and then presented their recommendations to them. So that's a way you can use those advisory councils. And sometimes you have to rein them in, that last bullet point. Especially if you have a long-term advisory council, maybe that's been there for a number of years, they start to get this sense of they do have some type of independence from the city council. They work at your discretion. You can appoint or remove people at any time from those advisory boards. And you want to keep them in line, but you want to respect them for the work you're asking them to do and build those relationships. The one that's a little bit different is your planning commission. Your planning commission, in short, does have some bit of authority that's a little bit beyond the city council. Once again, planning commission is, to me, your most important advisory committee or commission or board is your planning commission, because they deal with a topic that is very detailed, very controlled, obviously, by the city code, has a lot of legal obstacles. Well, maybe obstacles isn't the right word. A lot of legal structure around it that they have to work within, but also can cause issues. Generally, this is a very general, broad statement, but for municipalities, when they get sued, more often than not, lawsuits come from land use decisions or matters that are out there. Your planning commission plays a really important role for you, because you're talking about private property. You're not just talking about public property, you're talking about private property and decisions, and being respectful of private property rights, but also trying to make decisions that are in line with the long-term vision of your community, with the direction you all want your community to go. You're trying to find that fine balance of allowing your citizens to do what they want with their property, but doing it in a way that does not harm the overall community in the direction that you are going. And you rely on your planning commission to be your experts on that. Once again, for the most part, they're advisory to the elected board. You all still are the final approval on preliminary and final plats, for example. You all are the ones who will ultimately adopt any updates to your comprehensive master plan. They do a lot of the legwork for you. They're the ones that can do that deeper dive, working hand in hand with your staff, with Tracy as your planner, with your city attorney. There's a lot of work that goes into that. So when decisions are finally made or brought to you to make those final decisions, you've had your planning commission that has vetted a lot of those things. Where I do say that they do have some level of independence, most planning commissions, though, do have the ability to make final decisions on as Board of Appeals, or you may have a separate Board of Appeals that would fall under kind of this land use planning commission side. Variances and conditional use permits is where you will usually see them, that they have some level of authority to make that decision, and it does not come to your city council. They have very specific parameters that they have to work within in regards to your code on variances and conditional use permits, but often planning commissions can make those decisions. They do not go to city council, but once again, they're very detailed, specific land use decisions that you're relying on them and their expertise to do. But they also provide a lot of guidance to you. They're going to be your forefront that if there are, let's say, a number of land use applications that come in and they keep running into problems in your city code, you rely on your planning commission to really make some recommendations to you to say, hey, maybe we need to make this change to our city code. You see this all the time. City code is the law of your city, right? You pass ordinances that make the law of your community in your city code. But over time, your community changes. And maybe there are portions of your city code that, while they were relevant 20 years ago, are not necessarily relevant to your community today. This could be, zone changes, for example. Historic preservation is another one that you'll see that changes over time. Your planning commission could be a very valuable tool to make some recommendations to all of you to say, hey, we know this is your vision. This is the direction you want our community to go. We're really focused on economic development, trying to grow, our presence in these industries because we feel they'll bring value to our industry. But we have provisions in our code that really prevent those industries from relocating to our community. So they may be making some recommendations to you, or can vet some of that research to make recommendations of, let's make some changes to our code, or let's remove this hurdle, this barrier that's there now, because it doesn't serve us a need that we have today that we had some years back. So your planning commission can really play an important role in helping make those changes or recommend those changes to you. And that last point, they serve as a voice of the community on land use. They not only represent the city itself when it comes to land use matters, but they're really there to listen to those applicants that come in and provide some feedback on saying, hey, our community is really wanting to go this direction. We should be looking at some changes here. Role of city manager. As I mentioned before, your city manager is your employee. They are the only employee that reports to all of you. All the other city employees report to the city manager. And you need to keep that in mind. And just a little side note here, because of John's announcement with his retirement, I work with a lot of communities if they want. I'm just offering this up. I'm free to assist and work with you all in replacing your city manager. In fact, I sat in on one of the interview panels when John was hired, when Shane Hale left. I was on a committee with the city manager from Durango at the time, from Ken Charles. Some of you may know Ken Charles. He was in my position for over 30 years with DOLA, retired. He's now the interim city manager there in Dolores. But Ken Charles, Ron LeBlanc, and myself were one of the interview committees when John was hired. I'm here to do that and help you guys in any way with this. And I'm free, no cost to you to do that. But two things I'm going to tell you. First off, whenever I work with city in the region or municipalities in the region of hiring a manager, or even counties hiring county managers, I tell the elected officials, hiring your city manager will be one of the most important decisions you make as an elected official. Because, as I said, you are hiring the one employee who is responsible to carry out your direction, to carry out your policies, to carry out your decisions. They are the ones that make the staff do what the decisions are that your citizens have elected you to make in those decisions. So keep that in mind as you go into this process to replace John. It is a very important decision that you'll be making, because you want to choose somebody that can work with you as a body, that you guys can individually get along with, but you will also have the confidence that they will carry out your direction and work with your staff to accomplish those goals, to accomplish that vision, to accomplish the plan that you will be creating with that. With that, I want to suggest, just because I was involved in this process before, and you know, I don't know how many of you know Shane Hale. I'm assuming a lot of you already do remember Shane. So it's not just John, but Shane. I've known Shane for as long as I've been in local government. I've known him for a lot of years. So I knew a lot of the great things your community was already doing, even before I worked for DOLA, just because I knew Shane and what he was doing in Cortez, and what your previous elected officials were even doing that. And then what that's carried on with John, and what you guys are now in charge of carrying on and envisioning. Cortez has a lot of great things going on for it, but it is challenged because you're so far from Denver or the mainstream of things. And so to really get a quality manager candidate into your community, I would strongly encourage you guys to look at bringing in an outside entity to help you. Even when it's small communities, City of Ouray, for example, just hired a city manager. Silas started at the beginning of November, beginning of December. As small as Ouray is, we've got just over 1,000 citizens. I recommended they get somebody to help that recruitment process. It's not something you can do internally easily. There's challenges with that. There's some subjectivity that gets involved with that. Just hiring a firm to really help market it, because I can tell you, especially in this pandemic time, that the challenges that we've got, that COVID-19 has added to the way we do our day-to-day business. It's not just about you finding the right city manager. It's about the city managers, the good candidates out there. There are a lot of good candidates that could come your way. The good candidates, they're going to be doing their homework and research on you. And as much as you're trying to find the right fit for you, they're trying to find the right fit for them. And so you've really got to have this balance of, it's not just about hiring and finding the right candidate, but it's also marketing Cortez and the great things that you have going on in your community. And so a professional firm can help you with doing that. And you can do everything. There's big national firms. They're kind of the gold standard. One of them is called Peckham and McKinney. Another one's called SGR. There's a few of those. You're going to pay some big bucks for them. There are smaller companies, though, that can do that depending on what the city can afford. But I would just strongly encourage you to do that. A good company will come in, they will work with all of you to really understand what are the characteristics you're looking in as a city manager. And I'm not just talking about, well, they're a good communicator, they're a good organizer, they follow through. Those are standard. Those are the basics that we want in people. But there's going to be certain specific characteristics that you're looking for based on the challenges you not only know you're facing today, but where you want to see your community in the long run. They can help you to refine that and then gear that advertisement towards those type of candidates. They help weed down a lot of the people, because you'll get people that have never managed before. They're fresh out of college with a degree. You're going to get people that maybe they've got years of experience, but when you do a little research, you find out, they've violated code of ethics, or they've done something illegal, and that's why they've left other communities. There's going to be a wide range of applicants you're going to have that want to come to Cortez. A company can help narrow that down, and then really help you and you as a body, as an organization, organize a good process to vet your candidates and help you to narrow it down to that one select person that you as a body, as a city council, are choosing to do that. So I went off script here a little bit with that because of the situation with John leaving, but I wanted to really pitch that out. And I just want to stress again, I'm here to help you with that. I can help you on any level of that you may or may not want. And if you don't want any help from me at all, that's totally fine too. I'm not going to say, oh, the hell with city council. I talked to them about this. I'm here to help you guys. So if you need anything from consideration of who you should be hiring as a professional firm to what the process looks like, or even, hey, Patrick, we want you involved in the interview process with us, I'm here to help you with that. So off that little side note, role of city manager, obviously prepare and present the council the annual budget. Number 2, recruits, hires, terminates, and supervises your staff. And I'll go into this a little bit more, but your staff reports to your city manager. They do not report to you. Think of it, go back to the corporate world as an example, as an analogy here. You're the board of directors. You have a CEO. You have staff that report to them. People in a company, the day-to-day workers in a company, the people that are on the ground getting the work done, do not report to the board of directors. They usually report to the chief operating officer or the chief executive officer, who then reports to the board. And the board also has a board president. It's a similar type of thing from us and how we manage our government. Your staff reports to your city manager. Your city manager reports to you. If your staff is not doing what you want them to do, you take that up with the city manager. And if they continue not to do it, that means that city manager is not carrying out your will as the city council. Go down to what that other bullet, serves at the pleasure of the governing body. The city manager works for you, and we as managers understand that. A professional manager understands that. What that means, when you all have to make decisions, and this gets into that, discuss the pros and cons of alternatives to offer assessment of the long-term consequences of a council decision. As matters come to you, your city manager plays an important role. They're an advisor to you. They can provide you input. Our job as a city manager is to provide you the pros and cons of every decision. We are humans. We try to make that as objective as possible, but sometimes our subjectivity is granted in that. But a good city manager, with the support of the staff, because the staff, it's not just the city manager relies on your staff to do this. As a decision is before you, they should be providing you both sides of the story. They should say, here's one way to look at it, here's the other way to look at it, in simple sense. But then in the end, we make a recommendation to you. And that recommendation is from our perspective. A good city manager understands you're making decisions that not only impact your community today, but impact your community in the future. And so a good city manager is going to provide you both sides of that and their recommendation. In the end, though, we know as managers, it's your decision. It's not ours. And our job is to carry out your decision no matter what it is. Even if we disagree with it, we are responsible for carrying out your decision. And I will tell you, my 13 years as a city manager, there were lots of times city council made decisions that were against my recommendation, or I thought, wow, you should have spent more time discussing this, or you should have got more input from that. I could express that to them, but in the end, they made the decision. Once that decision was made, I would sit in my staff meeting the very next day. So we would do our city council meetings on Monday nights, and every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. was our staff meeting. And there were times my staff would get in there and they were really upset about a decision that was made by the city council the night before. And I'd say, doesn't matter, folks. They've made the decision. They're the ones that are elected by the citizens, not us. Our job now is to carry it out, and we're going to carry it out to the best of our ability. We're going to do that. So that is the city manager's job. And something else to keep in mind, don't make decisions worrying about hurting the feelings of your city manager or your staff. Once again, we're professional staff with education and background and training, and that we understand that happens. I always give the example that my city council at one time we had a rezoning application that came before the city council. It was a hotel that was in a commercial area, but they owned a piece of property that was right on the other side of the street, but that was in a residential zone. And they were asking to change the zoning map to include this house that they bought into their commercial zone. And it was a pretty heated discussion, a lengthy process. Quite frankly, me as staff and our city attorney were recommending this is spot zoning, which is not necessarily legal. I'll default to Mike to say on that one without the background, but there was all this stuff. But the night the city council was making the decision, there was this huge presentation from the applicant, and then they, of course, started making threats against the city council and all this kind of stuff. We're going to sue you and everything. In the end, though, city council went against our recommendation and they approved this zoning change. So, into the meeting ends, and everybody's filtering out, and I would always go down to my office and kind of wrap up some things and turn off the lights. And benefit of living in Ouray, I live 2 blocks away from City Hall, so I just walk home. So I pack up and I'm walking out the door, and by then most of the crowd had cleared out and gone home, but one city council member was still standing out on the corner waiting for me. And as I came up to Gary, he looks at me and he said, "We really screwed up tonight, didn't we?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "We made the wrong decision." And I'm like, "I'll be honest, Gary. Yeah, you screwed up. You shouldn't have done this, and here's the reasons why." And I said, "You also set a precedent that we already know some other applicants are now going to come in because they saw you do this, and they're going to want consistency now that I talked about before. They want to be treated the way you treated this applicant, and it's going to create some challenges and issues." Well, this council member, he literally actually started to cry. And Gary was this passionate person. He always wore his emotions on his sleeve. And I loved him. I loved the guy for that. He started crying. He goes, "I'm so sorry. How will you ever forgive us?" And I'm like, "Gary, there's no forgiving. There's nothing. You made the decision. Yes, I feel you made the wrong decision based on these issues, but it doesn't matter. You made the decision. We will carry this out. We will follow through, and we'll deal with all those other issues if and when they come up. It does not matter. You're not going to hurt your city manager's feelings. We understand you are the ones that are chosen by your citizens to make these decisions. Please feel free to make these decisions, okay? Our job is to carry them out for you. We'll make recommendations to you, but it's your decision, and we are bound by the action the council takes. I'll throw this, and just by the way, this presentation, I emailed it to John today. I'll make sure he makes it available to you all, or if you want to email me directly later, I can send it to you electronically, so you guys can look at this a little bit more. But this is a slide that I took from a different presentation some time ago that just really kind of helps to show role of the board versus the role of the manager. Like number 3, represents the organization to the wider community stakeholders. Manager manages the day-to-day. Using that discussion I talked about before, you guys operate at the 35,000 foot level. You guys have the cool job. You don't have to worry about the stuff in the weeds, in the mud. You don't get down there. You get to come up with great visions and say, "We want to go this direction, and we've got this great idea." You're the creative minds. You're the ones that are saying, "This is where we want to take our community." Then you turn to your city manager, you go, "Now get us there. Figure out how to get us there." And that's what your manager and your staff do. They're the ones on the ground, in the weeds, figuring it out, saying, "Okay, council wants to do this. How do we get them there?" Rely on them to do that. They should be the ones coming to you saying, "Okay, to get there, it's going to take this. We're going to need these resources. We're going to need this type of funding," whatever it is. But it's their job to bring that back to you, to tell you how they're going to get there. You get to come up with the fun stuff. You're the creative minds to say, "This is where we want to go." Your staff will figure out how to get there, and that's what the manager does. Your staff, once again, hired by the city manager, serves under the direction of the city manager. This is really important, and this can be challenging a lot of times with elected officials. Because how often do you find that one of you, some situation may come up, and you want to talk to John about it, and he's the one you should be bringing it to his attention. But it's just easier if I go over and I talk to the public works director myself, and I'll talk to them. And then, next thing you know, you're given some guidance or whatever. Well, what happens is, one, you're giving direction to your staff who don't report to you. And then you're also an individual council member that's giving direction. You're not representing the body. It's not the body. It's not the city council that has made the decision. You're offering your opinion on what you should think is done. That puts your staff in a very difficult situation. And once again, I'll use an example from my experience. So I had this mayor that I worked for, good guy, well-intended. it was the classic. He got a call from some citizens complaining about a big hole that was in a street and wanted it fixed. And he's like, I'm not going to bother Patrick with that. It's just a pothole. I'm just going to go down to the city shop and I'm going to talk to the public works director directly. So he did that. And he said, Dan, can you go and fix this pothole for us up there? Well, Dan, rightfully so, as my employee, came to me right after the mayor left, and he said, I've got a dilemma. The mayor came down, wanted me to fix this problem over here. But Patrick, you and I have already worked together, and you've given me direction to fix this other issue over there, which was a water utility issue. It put our public works director in a very difficult situation because now he's having to answer to two bosses. And he was confused. He's like, who do I serve? He's like, Patrick, the mayor came and told me to have the crew go do this. And it wasn't just go throw some dirt in a hole and fix it. I mean, it was some significant changes of the slope of the road and everything. It ended up being a big enough hole that it took almost a half day of the crew's work to fix it. But in the meantime, we had this water issue that Dan and I were already agreeing on was the priority that we needed to get fixed. It was impacting a group of citizens who their pressure was down. They were having all kinds of issues. We needed to get that fixed. It put him in this very difficult position of serving two bosses. Any of you that have worked for people before understand how difficult of a situation that can be. And he's like, the mayor is telling me to do something, but Patrick, you're the one that evaluates my performance and who makes the ultimate decision working with me. Don't put your employees in that position. If you need something done, go to your city manager. Your city manager, it may be something simple. He's like, yeah, we can get right on it. Let me make a phone call. I'll talk to Public Works and we'll get that done. Or he may come back and be able to advise you, say, you know what, that's a good point, but that takes a bigger decision. That isn't something you and I individually can make. We need to take that to the city council. Let's get that on an agenda. Let's present these issues there and let's get direction from the body. Your city manager can help you navigate that. As I said before, it puts your staff in a difficult position. If any of you are individually out there trying to give direction, it causes a lot of morale issues with that. Now, in that story that I provided in my case, as soon as Dan, my public works director, brought it to my attention, I'm like, I got it, Dan. Don't worry, I'll take care of this. Picked up the phone, called the mayor. Mayor came up to City Hall, and I said, Bob, listen, you can't do this. This is the situation you just put Dan and his staff in. This is the plan that Dan and I were working on because of these things. As soon as I said that, Bob was great. He's like, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. I just thought it was a quick hole that they could go fix. You want to do that. Your staff, a good staff and a good relationship with your manager should go to your manager if any of you come to them individually, but you all need to keep that in mind. And once again, because your city manager reports to all 7 of you, it's not his job to say, you can't do that. He's going to rely on you to hold each other accountable, and you guys need to be accountable for each other. So keep that in mind, whether it's any of the 7 of you or any, some of you that continue on the city council and you got new members that come on. If you hear of your city council members giving direction to your staff and causing some issues, it really relies on all of you to come back and say, hey, let's think about this. Remember, we work as a body. We have a professional city manager that reports to us. Let's respect the process. In the military, they call it the chain of command. It's the same kind of thing. You want to follow the proper chain of command, because when you start to deviate from that, things start to break down, morale starts to break down. It causes some issues. But you have expert staff, rely on them with their knowledge and their recommendations they make. They assist with all these things that we talked about. They provide the reviews and reports to you. They advise, your staff advises your city manager. They're there to help advise your advisory boards and give them research and information, your planning commission, and all of you. Citizens, as I said, they play a role in this too. And I put in parentheses here, though, a little bit different. Citizens should participate fully. They should. You want them to participate. You want to hear from your citizens. Do they always do that? Probably not. It's not uncommon that you will have a council meeting and you may have only a handful of citizens that are there. There are times you're discussing important topics that are going to impact your community, and you only have a few citizens there that are there. Realize, though, it's only the voice of a few citizens. You want them there. You look for ways, creative ways to get input from your citizens when you need that for the decisions you make. Appointed and elected officials, they advise, not always politely. We want them to come in and say, hey, give us your input. We want to hear your input. We want to hear your thoughts. Sometimes they can be very passionate with that. I had a situation one time where he had a citizen, he was at a city council, he was upset, and he was rightfully so. He had a situation that was dramatically impacting his home and his street, and he and his wife, and he was going off to the city council. Now, he wasn't being rude, he wasn't being personal with his attacks, but he was shaken, he was upset, he was spitting, he was so upset. Next day during the staff meeting, my staff was like, God, I can't believe that guy was acting that way. And I'm like, no. This was a saying I learned a long time ago in some leadership training I took. Focus on the situation, not the individual. I go, he was passionate, he was hurt, he was angry, he was upset, but listen to what he was saying. What he was saying was legit. We were doing something that was wrongly impacting he, his wife, and his neighbors, and we need to make some adjustments to that. And so it was like filter through the noise and listen really to the content of what he was trying to explain. And once we did that, we went back and we made the changes that changed this street and what was going on the street. He came back to the city council that 2 weeks later, and he apologized to them for his actions, but he was also grateful and appreciative of the changes that they did. And he talked about how they had improved things and how he was going to support and promote what was done then going forward. So, they're not always polite, but we rely on them to give us some input. And then the last one, ask questions and offer solutions. They sometimes will do that. They will often ask questions. They will often tell you how you're doing the wrong thing, but they rarely will offer solutions. And I had another mayor that I worked for, she was excellent at when citizens would bring a complaint forward, they'd come during citizen communication at the beginning of the council meeting, and maybe they were upset about something and they were expressing their opinion on something. And she would always go, okay, and what would you suggest we do? What kind of solutions would you suggest? I used to do that with my staff all the time. They bring a complaint to me and say, great, what would you suggest we do to change that? Give them the opportunity. It gets them to get buy-in. And it gives you that chance to engage in dialogue with them a little bit. Well, let's say, well, why can't you just do this? Well, let me explain why we can't do that. We're statutorily not allowed to do that, or we have to take these other matters into consideration. It's an opportunity for you to help educate them on those higher level issues or there's topics or there's perspectives that they hadn't even taken into consideration, but give them information. But you know what? Sometimes they come with a solution that you hadn't considered, and you're like, wow, that could actually work. I will tell you, as much as you don't want to, you will start to get blinders on and say, well, we've got to do it this way because that's how we've always done it, right? But then they can come to you and say, but why? Why can't you do it this way? And then you take that step back and you're like, that's a really good point. It's faster, it's cheaper. Why don't we look at doing it that way? Ask them to provide you some solutions. Get their input and say, what do you suggest we do with this? Applicants are the other ones that I talked about there before. I'm not going to go into this a little bit other than you really want to be careful and predictable on how you handle, or consistent in how you have to handle applicants for whatever it may be, whether it's a land use applicant or an applicant for a special use permit of some type, whatever it may be. You want to really be consistent in how you do that. And you want to, that last point, have a realistic expectation and understanding of the role of government for them to help them understand. You'll get people say, why do we have to get a permit to do this? We want to just do this. Why do we have to go through this process? You want to help them understand what it is, because you're looking at the whole of your community and what that means. Relationship building, that's all it is. A strong council staff partnership really creates a successful organization in serving your community. And as I said before, I think we all have seen it in communities we visited that are really just humming along. There's examples in our region where you could see communities that are just hitting on all cylinders. A lot of it is because of that relationship that they have between their staff and their council working together. Constraints, just keep in mind, Volunteer for the most part. I know you guys get a little pittance of, recognition. You definitely don't become elected officials for the money. None of us get with that. You know, it can be vague on what your role is. You've been elected, but now you make decisions. What are those type of decisions? The little feedback or evaluation of performance, like I said, very rare do citizens tell you when you're doing a great job. They will come to you and tell you when you're doing a bad job. But the main thing is they will evaluate you when you come up for reelection. If you decide to run again, they will evaluate that. And then you're held to open meetings. We'll talk a little more about that. Staff constraints, don't put your staff in a position that they have multiple bosses that they have to respond to. Changing agendas and mixed messages are kind of go together. You want to be able to give clear vision to your staff and to your community of what you're trying to accomplish, and then let them carry it out. Don't say, okay, we want to go here, and then 2 weeks later at the next council meeting, say, well, now we've actually decided we want to go this way. And then we'll backpedal and we're going to go back this way. Give a clear vision. Your staff and your citizens are relying on you all. That goes back to that leadership thing. They're looking to you to provide the leadership to give a clear vision for your community, and then give that vision, and then let your staff carry it out for you. And then obviously we're all with limited resources. There is not a single municipality in our region or in the state of Colorado that has unlimited resources that can do whatever they want. Obviously we have limited resources, whether it's personnel, experience, dollars, obviously, resources available around us to support what we're trying to do, whether it's, I work with some of the, for example, rural communities like, Dove Creek or Nucla, Natarita. They have very limited contractors that are available out there. They've got these big projects they're trying to do, but the contractors that may be around are so busy with other projects that they can't get 5 or 6 bids. They can't even get 2 bids when they put out bids for a capital project to really help evaluate that. So, those resources can be limited. It's difficult for staff to work around. Obstacles in developing that relationship. All city council members may not see themselves as members of the team. I use the term team loosely once again. You're members of a body that makes a decision together. You have to make those decisions. And then you can't do it individually. You can't expect, well, I know the council said this, but we really want you to do that instead. You as a body make a decision, and your staff and your citizens rely on that. That number 2, moving on after a difficult or close contentious issue and discussion, you probably already have had a number of 4-3 votes. The important thing though is respect the democratic process. Once the body has made the decision, the majority has made a decision, you move on. Don't keep going back. If you keep going back, you stall your community. And I say this to a lot of communities. I said this even prior to COVID-19, but now, especially with COVID-19, there's a lot of competition out there between municipalities. You're trying to get tourists to come to visit you. You're trying to get economic development and diversification. You're trying to hire quality people. You're competing against a lot of other communities out there. And Cortez has a lot of great assets, but so do a lot of other communities. You don't want to be making contentious issues and then going back and revisiting, because what's going to happen is you begin to stall out your community. And when you stall out your community is going to suffer. You want to keep things moving forward in a positive direction. Does not mean it means positive, we all feel good. But once we've made a decision, we're now taking our next step. We're moving forward with our community. So when those contentious decisions happen and the decision is made, you need to move on. It gets back to that agree to disagree thing. And then council and staff do not always speak the same language. It's communication. You got to keep working together on that. Usually we have a communication exercise that we try and do. I'm not going to do that. Obviously, it's a little bit different with Zoom. But just once again, communication is key. It's a really important thing. Communication with you, each other as individual council members, you as a body to your staff, and your staff to your community. Communication is key. It's really important thing. Communication with you, each other as individual council members, you as a body to your staff, and your staff you as a body to the citizens of your community. Just talk a little bit about the organizational structure, mayor, city council. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you don't have a lot of authority. You're the, really your only authority is you're the presiding officer over your city council members. Beyond that, you're at the same level as every other city council member. You're a voting member of the body, and every other city council member needs to keep that in mind.
Hey,
Yes, the
Patrick.
mayor is often the chief ceremonial officer. They're the ones to give the speech at an event or give the keys to the city to somebody, an outstanding citizen along those lines. Or, maybe they're the ones that will stand up and speak when, other important elected officials come to the community, whatever it may be. However you guys want to do it. It doesn't have to be the mayor. There are some communities that they just have that designated person who is the face of the council for special events and such. But really, always keep in mind the mayor does not have any special authority. You're a voting body member. There are a couple of communities in the state of Colorado, city and county of Denver is an example where they have a strong mayor, but you have what's called the council manager form of government. You as a body, you all have an equal vote on your city council. You got to work closely together for the management of municipal affairs, and you all operate under the authority of Colorado Revised Statute Title 31, which is the whole piece that sets up about municipal government. Just real quick, types of meetings, regular meetings that you have. It says most meetings must be noticed and open to the public at all times. Yeah, it shouldn't just be most, it is meetings must be noticed and open to the public and noticed properly, and the public can come and watch. As it says, happens on a consistent basis, time and location. It's procedural. You have the roll call, approval of minutes, usually a citizen communication opportunity, old business, new business discussion items that you work through. Those are set, those are consistent. People know they can rely on it. They read the paper, they go to the website, they look at the agendas, they know when topics are coming up, they come and participate if they want, or they come and observe. They may want to see how you handle things. Those are your regular meetings. You can have special meetings. Those are held for special situations. They're still open to the public. They're still notified properly. Require the 24 hours notification on that. Special meetings, though, you can still make a decision. You don't have to do it during the regular meeting, but you want to use special meetings a very limited process. Usually these are matters that are time sensitive, maybe emergency declarations, or sometimes like you've got a contract that needs to be approved, and it's timing in regards to when the contractors can get involved and get started on a project. You've had a major rupture with your water treatment plant or something like that, and you got to get contractors in, and you got to call a special meeting to approve a contract with the contractor because you're time sensitive with that. You want to be careful of how you use special meetings, because once again, you don't want to say, hey, we're going to make this big financial decision that's going to impact our citizens. Let's just do it in a special meeting, because we don't want to have all of our citizens come to our regular meeting who are opposed to that. That is not the point of special meetings, to use that way. They are very specific of what you're looking to do them for. Work sessions, this is a work session. They are not a time when any decisions are made. This is an opportunity for you all to take a deeper dive into particular subjects or topics that you have. I'll use marijuana again. When marijuana was first legalized and the city of Ouray was considering what we wanted to do with marijuana, we had a number of work sessions where we did deeper dives into topics of like security, economic impact, cultural impact. What was going to be the culture, the perception of what it looked like for the city of Ouray, and what the city of Ouray was known for. We did work sessions where we brought in expert speakers, we talked and got more information, had more dialogue that the council could have, but then any decisions went to a regular council meeting. Do not have discussion or make decisions during work sessions. Some communities can decide whether or not you want public input at work sessions. I usually say it depends on the subject. Sometimes you can get public input at work sessions, but sometimes you want to limit or not have any public input at a work session. And let me clarify that. That does not mean the public cannot watch. They get to hear you, but this is about you all having the time to discuss and educate and be informed on a subject. This public can have their input when the item, the discussion item or is moving towards action or gets scheduled on a regular meeting, and then you can take public input at that time. You absolutely should take public input at that time. But sometimes sessions, you don't want public input. This is your time to talk. And citizens have a hard time with that. They may say, hey, you have to hear from me. You go, no, we'll hear from you when we're going to have this on a regular agenda, because we can't make any decisions in a work session, but this is our time to become informed of that. It's really up to you on how you want to handle that. I had a mayor that worked every work session, didn't matter what the subject. If citizens showed up, she always gave them an opportunity to talk. I had another mayor that work sessions never took input from the public during a work session, but he was diligent in making sure that the public got ample opportunity to comment on a topic when it got to the regular agenda. So you guys will have to decide how you want to do that and handle those things. And then executive sessions. Once again, Mike will go into much more detail and be the one that can really advise you on this, but executive sessions are the only time you can have closed door discussions, but you're very limited on how you do those. You have to be very specific. First off, the executive sessions can only take place during a meeting, so a regular or special meeting, and I would advise you want to avoid it at all costs, even in a special meeting. You want to do executive sessions during regular meetings only as much as you possibly can. There are some exceptions to that, but really during the you want to do those during the regular meetings. You have to announce that you're going into an executive session, and you have to publicly announce on record what the statutory citation of what you're going into an executive session and the general topic. You don't have to go into the specifics, but you would say, for example, we're a motion to go into executive session to get legal advice and also establish strategy of negotiation for the possible purchase of property from Montezuma County. You want to title it on that level. It takes a 2/3 vote of the board or the council, excuse me, to go into executive session. No action can take place in the executive session. It's truly to have discussion about it. You have to come out of executive session before you can take action. And then you have specific topics that you can only go in for executive session. Transfer of property interests, conference for the attorney for legal advice. Never ask your attorney to give you legal advice during an open regular meeting. Always do it in executive session. It puts your attorney in a very difficult situation doing it in a public meeting. Confidential matters, obviously, and then determining positions in regards to strategy negotiation, and then personnel matters. And personnel matters are have a piece with it too. If you're having a personnel matter, the personnel that is involved in that personnel matter, so it's your city manager, you have to notify them that you are going to be seeking to go into executive session. They can request, though, that the discussion take place in a public setting. Most often than not, they're not going to want to do that, because generally when you're discussing personnel matters, it's because somebody has done something wrong, and they don't want it to be out in the public. But you want to be careful with that. A separate recording must be done of your executive session. I would advise you let your attorney retain that recording. They're required to retain the recording for 90 days, then it can be destroyed. If there is a challenge of any kind that is filed in court against the executive session, that recording is then turned over to a judge who will listen to that recording. And if they feel you've violated any of the parameters of executive session, they can make any portion or all of that recording public. And I will tell a story of, there was a county in our region at one time that went into an executive session. They were making decisions about appointments for their planning commission. They went into executive session to discuss the applicants for these openings, and their planner was included in those discussions in executive session. Well, in the executive session, the planner made some very personal comments and opinions about the individual members that were applying to fill these open seats. Well, they came out of executive session, they made their decision. The newspaper filed in court that felt the decision was actually made in executive session prior to coming out of executive session, and challenged the legality of the executive session. The recording was turned over to a judge. The judge ruled against the county and made the entire recording of the executive session public. So now you had this planner who was saying very personal comments about the applicants to the county commissioners in an executive session because he thought it was going to be protected. Well, and ended up, because they violated the executive session statutes, the reporting came public. Needless to say, that planner was no longer employed with the county a couple weeks later. Even though you're in executive session and it may be just all of you and the city manager and the city attorney, you still want to be very careful of what you want to do, because if you vary outside the parameters of an executive session, it could become public. Rely on your attorney to help you manage that. Rely on your city manager to help you manage that. Hold each other accountable. You can't go off subject. You can't start talking about a different topic in executive session when you've gone in on a certain topic. You got to watch those type of things. So just keep that in mind with that. Ethics, we're all bound by a code of ethics as public officials, whether you're elected officials or your staff. Me as a state employee, all of us are bound by the code of ethics. This goes into a little bit more of it here. I'm going to breeze through some of this. I would always recommend that you rely on Mike to talk to you about ethics and some of the pieces that are going to be coming up in regards to that. That last point, local government officials or employees shall carry out their duties for the benefit of the people. That's a key thing to keep in mind. Here's some thou shall nots. Don't use confidential information for your personal or financial gain. Don't accept gifts. You are allowed, there are certain things that you're allowed to accept to a monetary value. I think it's up to $56 worth of value now, but you have to be very careful with that. It doesn't mean you can't be out to lunch with somebody and somebody buys you lunch, but you want to be careful. That whole perception is reality thing that I mentioned before. If you've got a land use developer who's got an important topic coming before you all, and then he also happens to be a good friend of one of you and you go to lunch together, you got to be careful. People are going to perceive that you're receiving something. Especially don't let him buy you lunch, type of thing. You want to pay attention to those type of things. Some of these other things top on where you got to be careful. That last line, I don't know if you guys would necessarily run into this. If you ever in a situation where you would have significant opportunity of an appeared conflict of interest, you can actually file a letter with the Secretary of State of recognizing that process. I'll go into that a little bit more here as an example. The kind of do's and don'ts. You're a member of the governing body and you are the opportunity to receive anything personal or private as a benefit to you. You got to be notice of that. And there's a process that you can do. So here's the story I'll give. So as I mentioned, this one mayor that I worked for, her and her husband owned a local survey company, and it's Ouray. We're not a big community, right? So just about every land use application that came through the city, her and her husband's company are the ones that developed the plat. And so this mayor would have to recuse herself from all of those because her company had been involved in this application and she could not in any way be a part of the final decision. And so one, because it happened quite a bit, we actually filed a letter with the Secretary of State. If it's something that happens once every blue moon, I wouldn't advise it. Once again, I default to Mike on this. He's your legal advice, not me. I am not an attorney. If it's something that's blue moon, I don't know that you need to file a letter with the Secretary of State, but this mayor, because it was pretty regular, we just wanted to be upfront. We had a letter that was drawn up that was filed with the Secretary of State that just said, her role as the mayor, but also this private company and any and all matters that were related to her company was involved in, she would always abstain from those votes. Now, this thing here, I would recommend do all of the following. If you ever have a conflict of interest, you need to disclose that openly during the meeting. So once again, there isn't this perception that you somehow were a part of the decision. So that when the topic gets introduced on the agenda, you disclose, Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself or abstain from voting on this subject because I do have a conflict of interest. You do not have to go into detail. You could just say you have a conflict of interest. Um, and so you should abstain from the vote. My recommendation is on this third one, though, you should not in any way attempt to influence the vote. I used to direct my city council, once you've abstained, you should actually leave the room. Don't just go even stand in the back of the room. And if you're in the back of the room and the rest of the city council is up there on the podiums, and they're having discussion, and you're shaking your head yes or no, it could be perceived that you're trying to influence the vote, even though you abstained. So once again, this mayor, she would actually leave the room, and the mayor pro tem would take over the discussion until a decision is made. And then once the decision was made, she would come back in and reassume her role as the mayor and the presiding officer of the meeting. That's my recommendations. Once again, fault to Mike on that, but you want to be careful with that because you don't even want a conflict. Maybe you follow the steps, you abstain, but you don't want your citizens thinking you had some undue, you're benefiting in some way from it. I'm not going to go into all these, but these are those other areas: quasi-judicial, ex parte contact, the Governmental Immunity Act and Amendment 41. Once again, you can rely on Mike to give you more detailed training in these, or CIRSA. CIRSA's legal counsel, a gentleman named Sam Light, does excellent training on all of this. CIRSA also has a book that was written in conjunction between CIRSA and CML called the Public Official Liability Handbook. If you don't have a copy of it, I recommend you get it. It's dry reading, but it's a great resource. It's pretty simple. It's a handbook. You can read through it pretty quickly, and we'll cover a lot of these things to help you. Just some stuff about personal gain, conflict of interest. So I'm wrapping up here. I got two more slides here, but this is where I really want to go into a couple of things, and then we'll open it up for any questions or discussion. Working together as a city council. Once again, you all will not be individually successful as elected officials. You're only as successful as the body as a whole is, and that's really important to keep in mind. Value each other's ideas and value the person and their perceptions they bring. Be respectful, be professional. You all bring unique experiences, knowledge, background, expertise to any of the discussions that's taking place. Be respectful of that, of each other. Cooperate with each other. Work together as a body. Work together because you all have the same goal. You want what's best for the city of Cortez. You want what's best for your community. You would not have gone through all the work and challenge of getting elected to city council if you did not want that. But work together on achieving that goal, creating that vision, that shared vision, that goal that you can move yourselves direction to. Keep discussions in the room for executive sessions or sensitive issues. Be respectful of that. Don't be in executive session and then come out and then go home and tell your spouse or tell your good friend what you discussed in that. Be respectful of the executive session and how privileged that opportunity is to have a closed door meeting amongst you all because you're making important decisions for your community. Avoid personal attacks and personalization, not only with each other, but with your staff, with your citizens. Keep the big picture in mind. Once again, where are you going in the long run? Your decision. It's not just a matter of whether we approve this today and what that impact is today. What's it look like for our community in the long run? Respect the council's decision. Once it's done, you can state, I disagree with this. I'm going to vote against it. But once the decision is done, don't stall out your community. Move your community forward. Share credit. You are successful as a team. You are successful as a council. When the headlines are over and over again about you guys just arguing and fighting and not moving your community forward, all you're going to do is lose the trust and support of your community. I don't know about you. I'm going to say personally, but when I watch things that are happening on a federal level or even sometimes on a state level, it gets so disheartening in what's happening. We just see so much dysfunction on all sides, right? I'm not advocating for one party or the other, but we see that, and it just makes you feel horrible and sad about what the state of where we've come with things. The area that we have control is here with local government, with all of you. Keep that in mind, respect that, cherish that, show your citizens what good government looks like. We can argue, we could disagree, but in the end, we're moving forward for our community, for what's best for our community. Keep that in mind and be successful as a team. Treat others with respect, their opinions, support, and learn from each other. Be that positive ambassador for your community. Keep each other informed. Avoid surprises. I used to tell my staff this all the time. There are very, very few good surprises in the world. Most surprises are bad. Keep each other informed. Try to share with it. When something is brought forward to you, share it with everybody else so everybody's on the same page. Work with your city manager on getting it to all of you. It doesn't mean you call up everybody individually. Don't drop a surprise on the rest of your fellow city council members during a council meeting. Be respectful of each other. Be successful as that body. And then most importantly, have fun. It is a difficult job. I have the utmost respect for all of you willing to stand up and do this in your community. And it's not an easy time to be an elected official. But you're doing it because you all care about your community. You all care about the impacts on you, your families, your friends. This is an important job, but have fun with it. Rely on each other. Joke with each other. Build those relationships. And I understand it's been difficult to build a relationship when our meetings are like this. It is difficult to connect, but it's also the wave of the future. Doesn't mean you're going to always have council meetings like this, but I will be surprised if you do not have a Zoom component where people can interact, because it's become a tool where people can still interact. People that can't get out of their homes for one reason or another can still participate in the process. We're going to see the way we do government change coming out of this pandemic, but have fun with it. Interact with each other. Take those opportunities to get together where you can. Here's some best practices. Criticize the project or the process, not the person. Especially avoid scapegoating your staff. You have some incredible staff. I know there's been some challenges over the years. Be careful, protect them for it. They're not here for their own personal benefit either. They're here to do a job. Public service, you know, you're the old adage, public service is a calling. My wife would still to this day even says, why do you do what you do sometimes when, you know, you're in these late meetings or such like that? Because we care for our communities. We care for our fellow human beings that we work with and the people we serve. Be respectful of that. Don't scapegoat others. Don't be personal on attacks with individuals, whether it's each other, your staff, citizens. Even citizens may be that way with you. Call them on it. Hold them to a higher standard. If you guys act professional, people will start to do the same thing in how you manage your meetings and the feedback they give. Create mechanisms, and you probably have this in place right now, but you want to create mechanisms that's not drawing your city manager or your staff into intra-council conflict or community conflict. Really, and I say this to elected officials all the time, this is what you get paid the big bucks for. You're the face of the city, not your staff. It's you. And citizens are going to be upset and they're going to be angry with you sometimes, but how you manage and navigate that will build transparency, respect, confidence in what you're doing. Share information equally. You know, don't just pick out, well, I get along with 2 members of the council, and so I'm only share this information with them. Be open and share, because you're only successful as you are as a body. Support the majority decision. Talked about that. Seek and abide by the recommendations of your legal counsel. I keep bringing up Mike. I've never met Mike personally, so I can't say this. And Mike, I apologize. I keep picking on you with this, but I want to stress your city attorney provides an important role there. They're there to advise you on things. I used to joke with my city attorney all the time. I go, all you do is generally tell us no. That's kind of the nature of it, though. They're telling you how to keep out of troubles. So they will often say, you don't want to do that because of these reasons. Rely on that, though. The last thing you want to do is face your taxpayers, and especially I know the community of Cortez. You don't want to be facing your taxpayers and having to say, yeah, we're having to use your taxpayer dollars to defend ourselves in court for this action we did. instead of using their taxpayer dollars to provide services to them. You want to be very careful with that. Your attorney is an important person to keep you and helping to guide you with those things. Exercise cautions when discussing things outside of council meetings. Come prepared. We all have seen it. We've seen council members who don't read the packet until they show up at the meeting. How prepared is that? Take the time. There's a lot of work. There's citizens that are depending on you making well-informed decisions. Take the time to do the research. Take the time to read the packets before the meeting. Take the time to ask questions. Be prepared with questions before you come to meetings. It quite frankly reflects poorly on you, and it reflects poorly on the board or the entire council if people see that you clearly were not prepared ahead of time, that you're also going to go, what, wait a minute, it's already in the packet, the answer to that question I just asked. You want to pay attention to those things. Avoid making promises or commitments ahead of time. Only the body can make the decision. This next one, I should obviously do a little bit better with this presentation, be concise and conscious and concise of time. Ensure that all interested parties feel they've been heard. That's an important thing. Time and time again, I've seen people, maybe in the end, the decision was not what they wanted, but if they at least felt they were heard, that the elected officials understood their concerns and acknowledged their concerns, they could live with the decision. It gets back to that agree to disagree. They may disagree with the decision, but at least if they felt heard, they're going to be respectful of the process and you, and giving them the opportunity to talk. Maintain control with formality and protocol. It is very easy for some of our meetings to get out of control with citizens and what comes in there. You want to give your citizens an opportunity to express their opinions, but you've got to maintain control with that. An example of something that I did at one time. So obviously, you're Ray, not big crowds. I mean, we would average 5 or 6 people at a meeting on a good night for a city council meeting. But sometimes we would have people stand up in the audience, or they start catcalling from the back, or doing rude things, yelling things. So what we did is we put in a podium with the microphone, and we would require people to actually come up and say their name and their address. So it was on record. So we had it as part of the record through the recording, and then they could talk. Well, what that forced is it was one person talking at a time, and it gave the council better control of handling. It wasn't multiple people speaking at once. It was one person who could come up, they could be heard, express their comments, council could ask them questions if they wanted to, then they stepped away, then the next person came to the podium. That's how we controlled it. Because when I first started, like I said, it was kind of just a free-for-all. Just doing those simple things really helps control that formality and protocol of how your meeting is conducted. It helps you to keep it civil, but it also helps you to actually get work done. So keep that in mind with some of those things that you can do. Base all your discussions on facts and relevant information, not how you necessarily feel. There's going to be matters that come before that just make you feel yucky about it, or not comfortable about it. Or sometimes there's that applicant, that land use person comes in, and you just got a bad vibe about them. But it's not about that. It's about the facts that are presented to you. Are they complying with the regulations? Are they complying with the city code? Have they met all the needs that you require? Is your staff, what background and information did your staff provide, and what was their recommendation? Base your decisions on those things. And then, like I said, insist on decorum from each other, your staff, and participants in discussion. You're the ones that control that. Your city manager does not control all of you. Your staff does not control all of you. It's you holding each other accountable. And it is, sometimes things start to get heated, and maybe one of you need to speak up and say, hey, let's take a step back. Let's keep this all. We're all here. We all want the same thing, what's right for our community. Sometimes you got to remind each other of that. And sometimes you got to remind your citizens of that. So keep that in mind. So, all right, I told you those are my last two slides. I just threw a whole lot of information at you. If you haven't figured it out already, when you become an elected official, it's the proverbial drinking from the fire hose. I tell newly elected officials, it takes a good year before you start to feel you've got your feet under you. You've got a good understanding of what's going on. But I wanted to, since you guys have been so quiet, hopefully there isn't some audio issue here with that, but I wanted to offer up an opportunity for any kind of questions. As I said, John received a copy of this already. He can forward that out to you. You've got my contact information there. It's pretty straightforward, patrick.rondinelli@state.co.us. You go to the DOLA website, you can get this information too. But, I want to, at that point, see what kind of comments or feedback you guys have.
Thank you very much, Patrick. We appreciate your giving us your expertise and knowledge, and we have your contact information if we need to get in touch with you, and really appreciate sharing with us tonight. Thank you very much, Patrick.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say thanks for your great presentation, and you had a lot of good information, and we'll do our best, or I will do my best. I'm not speaking for everybody else, but to follow that. Thank you,
I have
Patrick.
absolutely. I have confidence in that. And I know John had told me you guys are working to try and schedule a retreat and get a way that you guys can start to get together. That's excellent. I'm here to help. If you guys are really wanting to start to develop the vision and strategic planning, bringing in a consultant with that is always great. I can give you some names of consultants if you don't have any, or I think John told me you guys already had somebody that you were looking to work with, which is wonderful. But those are the important things that you're doing for your communities. Continue to do that. Continue to work together. You need some, somebody to bounce things off of. I'm always here.
Hey, Senor Patrick, this is Orly.
Hey, Orly, how are you doing, buddy?
Living the dream,
That's right.
Yeah, appreciate it. You coming in, and that's a good refresher course. I mean, it's good. It kind of works for everybody. Like you said, it takes over a year or something to get the feel of everything. But I think the way council's going, I think we're just going to communicate good. But I appreciate all the info, Senor.
Absolutely, my friend. Anytime.
Thank you, council and audience, for participating in this talk. Let's see, we'll go to, are there any questions? We have 4 minutes before our regular meeting starts. So if you have any questions, you could probably talk to Patrick. You have his telephone number and his email address. So we're kind of short on time right now, but so if you have questions, I urge you to contact him, and I'm sure he'll do his best to answer your questions.
Absolutely will, folks. I tell people all the time, if it's time sensitive, call me, leave me a voicemail. I mean, obviously in this day and age, I'm in a lot of meetings. Leave me a message. I'll get back to you right away. If it's not time sensitive, email me. It may take me a couple days to get back to you, but by all means, please feel free to talk about whether it's anything from this or future issues to come up.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Okay.
All right, everyone. You all have a great night. Good luck with the rest of your meetings. We'll take care.